Saddam Hussein's rule over Iraq is almost always described with one phrase, an iron hand. But we hear that all the time. What does it actually mean? Well, in this explainer, we're going to get into it. We're going to break down the actual machinery of that power, the specific tools he used to control a nation and project that fear way beyond its borders. And really, it all boils down to this one quote from the man himself. These 5 words, this is the entire playbook. I mean, this isn't just some political slogan. It's the absolute guiding principle for everything the regime did. It created a very simple and very brutal reality. You were either with him or you were an enemy that had to be crushed. No in between. So how do you take a philosophy like that and make it real? Well, you start at home. You build a fortress from the inside out. Let's dig into the internal tools the regime used to get absolute control and just silence any and all opposition. The foundation for everything was mass repression. And you gotta understand, this wasn't surgical or targeted. It was more like a giant, heavy blanket of fear thrown over the entire country. The goal wasn't just to punish people who spoke out, but to make the very idea of speaking out just too terrifying to even think about. Of course, a climate of fear like that doesn't just happen on its own. It needs enforcers. And for Saddam's regime, that instrument was the secret police. Their job was to take that abstract idea of repression and turn it into a horrifying, very real part of daily life for every single Iraqi citizen. So this is what that terror really looked like on the ground. It wasn't just one thing, it was a whole system. You had constant surveillance, which made people suspicious of their own neighbors. Public punishments weren't just about the person being punished. They were a terrifying message to everyone watching. At the end of the day, the goal was psychological, to create a fear so deep that people would perform loyalty just to survive another day. And here's where the whole strategy just expands outward. The exact same logic they used to control their own people inside Iraq, they just turned it around and aimed it at other countries. The tools were different, sure. They swapped secret police for tanks and chemical weapons, but the goal was identical. Total domination through absolute force. Okay, so let's follow that thought. Let's look at how that power was projected outward, because that mission to crush enemies definitely did not stop at the border. It was scaled up and aimed at any country that was seen as standing in the way of Iraq's ambitions in the region. The most obvious tool, of course, was conventional war. The regime launched massive military campaigns. I'm talking about things like the absolutely brutal 8-year war with Iran, all to seize territory, control resources, and basically force its will on its neighbors. But when tanks and soldiers weren't getting the job done, the regime crossed a line that most of the world had agreed never to cross. It escalated to chemical weapons. And this was a horrifying shift, moving from just warfare to outright terror. They used them against foreign armies, and they used them against their own people, like in the genocidal Unfall campaign against the Kurds. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't some random act of cruelty. It was a calculated strategy. Think of it like a ladder. Step 1, you fight a conventional war. If that doesn't work, if you hit a stalemate, you move to step 2. You look for a decisive, game-changing advantage. And for Saddam's regime, step 3 was to climb that ladder and use chemical weapons to get that terrifying edge. So let's pause for a second. We've seen the tools for internal control, and we've seen the weapons for external power. But what happens when a regime actually pulls this off? What's the real consequence of wielding an iron hand that tight? All right, let's put all the pieces together. Because the secret police officer in Baghdad and the chemical attacks on the border, they were really just 2 different parts of the same brutal, terrifying machine. Okay, so this is the crucial point, the main takeaway. It all fits together perfectly. On the inside, you have secret police and repression, all geared toward one thing, absolute domestic control. On the outside, you have wars and chemical weapons, aimed at another goal, unchecked regional power. See? 2 different fronts, 2 sets of tools, but one single overarching mission that goes all the way back to that first quote, to crush all enemies. And that leaves us with one final and pretty heavy question. We've seen how an iron hand works. We've looked at the mechanics of it. But it leaves you wondering about the ultimate cost. What is the true price a nation and the world pays for a rule that's built not on consent, but entirely on force and fear?